safe space. We ain't never give a reason you should hide. Compile all your questions, we taking the quest. Join Tarcia on this journey to discover the rest. Go.
Welcome to the Adoption Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Tarcia Smith, and welcome back to yet another amazing, I'm going to call this an adventure. I feel like we're going to go on an adventure. I have a fellow adoptee with me in the house.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, Jasmine.
Hello.
And real quick before I forget, because y'all make sure y'all go to Patreon. Go check out the Patreon. Everything, mind, body, soul, veganism. That's me. If you're interested, working out, this podcast, some behind the scenes.
Check it out.
Okay, check it out.
Check it out.
So, Jasmine, you know how I do. We're going to dive right in, honey. Diving right in. So now I have two first favorite questions. My first question is, are you a same race adoptee or a transracial adoptee?
I am a same race adoptee.
Okay. And my second question is, how old were you when you found out that you were adopted?
So I found out when I was probably 7, 8, but
a little girl.
Yeah, I was very young. But my mother had the conversation with me when I was roughly about 9, 10 years old.
Okay.
So I was younger before we actually had the talk.
Okay, so how did you find out at 7 or 8 before you had the talk? Like, what led to that?
So I remember, I actually have some other relatives who also adopted.
Okay.
And it was a conversation that, as kids, we were playing in the backyard one day. And it was said like, well, we're all adopted. And it was just like that I realized like, oh, okay, so I'm adopted like them.
Okay, so here's my question to that, because I found out around that same age, but I can't remember why I knew what adoption was. Can you?
Oh, yes. So,
I don't know why I knew that.
And I'm so glad you asked. So the funny thing is, I was my parents' first adoptee. I was born in 1978. Immediately
70s baby. Okay.
Yeah. Immediately placed for adoption. And I remember my mom and dad had a girl, close in age with me. Mm-hmm. And but she didn't stay with the family. So she at some point she left. And I remember asking my mother, like, where is she? How come, she has to leave? How come she can't stay with us? And my mom just simply said, well, because she's not adopted. So in my mind, I thought to myself, like, oh, am I still here because I'm adopted? Completely oblivious to what adoption is. You don't know that at, 6, 7 years old, however old, you don't know. Yeah. And so, but the thought of like, oh, maybe that's why I'm still here. I'm still adopted. It just played in my mind. So that one day we were playing in the back, and if I'm being honest, I'm not exactly sure if the conversation of us playing in the backyard came first, or if it was the conversation I overheard with my father, talking to another relative of his when we were in his home state of South Carolina. Okay. And I remember someone asking him, like, is that your daughter too? And he said, that's the one we adopted. So I don't know if it was the conversation in the backyard or if it was the conversation I overheard with my dad. But then at that time, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm adopted.
Gotcha.
And so I kind of started to understand what adoption was before I even had the talk.
Okay. So what led to the talk?
So what led to the talk? I don't even know. I remember my mom and dad used to keep their room door, like, open but closed, so that if we needed anything, we knew when to just walk in when they were, getting dressed, or when we knew when to walk in when they were just doing nothing. And, they had their door positioned in a certain way where we knew it was okay to peek in the night. And I remember one night I peeked my head in and, I went back out. My mother said, come here. So I'm like, okay. So she says, I need to talk to you. She's sitting on the bed, my dad lying next to her. And she said, I need to talk to you. She said, do you know you're adopted? And I was like, yeah. I was confused because I had already known. I didn't know why the talk was necessary. I was like, yeah, I know. And so she said, well, how do you know? And I said, well, we were playing in the backyard once and I overheard it. And then I overheard Daddy talking before. And, I knew then. And so she was like, okay. And she says, well, let me just let you know. I do know that. And at this time, I'm like 9, 10, give or take. And she was like, well, your mom had a drug addiction. And I was like, okay. And she said, you have an older sister who stayed with the family. I'm like, okay. And she said, you have a brother here who lives in the same town.
Okay, was it an open or closed adoption?
It was a closed adoption.
All right, so non-identifying information.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I think from that conversation, what stuck was the fact that I have a brother who lives in the same town. The town is not big.
Yeah.
So I was like, what?
So now you're looking at everybody when you
Everybody. and his name was the only name that my mother knew that she could share. And I remember when
You got a name? Oh, I didn't even get that. Okay.
So I remember thinking, when my mom asked me, it was obvious that she and my dad hadn't had this conversation before she decided to have this talk, because when she asked me, do you know you're adopted? My father was like, what you tell her for? And that was his reaction. So with his reaction, I was like, okay, I'm not supposed to know this. It just stuck with me. I was like, I'm obviously not supposed to know this. So after we had this talk, I won't bring it up again, because obviously my father just wasn't comfortable with having this conversation, or even with me knowing.
You're only 9 or 10 and you're feeling like that. Wow.
And so, we used to ride our bikes through the town. And what my mother also told me, she said, you have a brother. She gave me his name. And she said, and he lives on this street. So we used to ride our bikes up and down the town, like.
Hold on. You had a name and girl, sip that tea. Because that's a lot.
Listen.
And a street.
I used to ride my bike up and down that street all the time. So wait.
But hold on, I want to know. I'm just curious to know why your mom told you that, because now I'm going to the street and looking for said person.
My mother always felt, and this was the conversation she had when she told me that I was adopted. She said, you should know who your family is. She knew my last name. She told me what my last name was, but she could not remember my birth mother's first name. She said,
okay.
So my name is Jasmine, named by my birth mother, but my family gave me the nickname Cookie. My mother.
That's cute.
And so it was one of those things, if I'm not mistaken, that when my mom and dad brought me home from the hospital, I was only 10 days old.
Okay.
And they didn't know anything. So they went with a name that they could relate to. Round face, little beady eyes, like a cookie.
little cookie. That's cute. Can I ask you what state you were born in?
New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just interesting how the laws and what you can get depending on where you are. Okay, so we're dealing in New York. All right.
Yeah. So I was a Kings County baby in Brooklyn, and my parents are from, came from Long Island, picked me up when I was just 10 days old, took me back to Long Island. That's where I was raised the rest of my life.
Okay.
So my mom told me, this is where it gets funny. So my mom told me, she said, when you were adopted, she said, they wanted to keep you with your brother. But the story that the agency told her, she said they wanted to keep you with your brother, but his family didn't want to keep you because of my mother's drug addiction. She didn't receive any prenatal care, so I was born missing fingers. So the story that the agency told my parents was that your brother's family didn't want to keep you because of your birth defect. So, right.
My mouth is open right now. Go ahead and take another sip of tea. Listen, family, you might want to pause and go get your own tea. And then come right back, because my mouth is open right now. What do you mean you don't want to keep her because she has a birth defect?
That's what the agency told my mother.
That's what was told. Okay.
Yeah. So
That could be truthful or not. Who knows? But
right. And so, and
yeah.
this is, I'm going to build up to that.
Right.
So my mom said they had taken me from my home on a like Thursday, and they brought me back on a Monday. She said that Tuesday, she and my dad got up. They went down to the court, whatever they did, whatever they needed to do so that they can move forward with the adoption because they didn't want to, lose me again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my parents had already had 5 biological children together.
Girl,
So,
stop. Wait. Up. Stop. Up. Up. Hold on. Hold on. 5 biological children. They said, you know what? Let's go get one more.
yep.
You're the second person I've heard tell a similar story. Is there a big age gap?
So between me and the oldest is 13 years. So it was the oldest is 13 years old. Well, all of them are 2 years apart except for the oldest two. They're 3 years apart.
5 kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the youngest two are twins. And so,
And they need
they
one
had
more.
they had 3 boys, 2 girls. And so, our pastor at the time, my mom said, brought in, someone who was in like a social worker or whatever, who thought, let me just visit the churches to let them know about adoption and foster care, yada, yada, yada. My mom looked more into it, and I was there first. So they had 5 biological, adopted 3, fostered maybe 40, give or take.
What?
Yep. Yep. And so I was there first. So I was there from the beginning and saw, all the kids come and go, everything. I saw it all.
You saw it all. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
So, so when she told me the story, I then knew I had a brother in the same town. So what's crazy about this town was that, and my mom told me, she said, he's about 2 or 3 years older than you.
Mm-hmm.
But even though we lived in the same town, they had like these districting rules when it came to school. So the part of town that we lived on, we were zoned to a different school from the school he was zoned to.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I would have known him before last year. I just met my brother.
Okay.
So
we'll
my
get
mom
there.
told
We'll
me,
get there.
yeah.
Get there.
So
yeah.
she told me everything she could, share. She was like, I know your last name is such and such. I know your mom had a drug addiction. She couldn't care for her kids and yada, yada, yada. So I'm like,
I love that she did that because there are some parents out here, especially around your parents' age,
yep,
because they're from that era.
yep,
This is a secret. We're not talking about. Don't ask me
yep,
no questions.
yep,
And the end.
yep.
So that's so dope that she did that.
And she
and
did it with
shared.
all of us. My mom always said, she was like, you need to know your family history. Like just because
Right.
you're adopted does not mean you shouldn't know your biological family. She just wasn't on it like
She
that.
understood that. She was ahead of her time.
Seriously.
For sure.
Seriously. And so, and I was just like, okay, but it was my dad's reaction that made me feel like, oh shoot, I'm not supposed to know. I'll just keep it in the back of my head, do whatever work
Right.
I need to do, and act like it's gone.
Okay, so number one of all these adopted and foster children, or because you said come and go. Okay,
Yep.
so adopted and foster children. Okay, so take me, like at this point when they start adopting and fostering, how old are you still a little girl? Are they doing this like immediately, like back to back to back?
I have memories of her being about 4 or 5 years old when I think the next child came in.
Okay.
And she didn't stay with us too long from, my recollection. She stayed with us for a while, but she had to leave. And like I said, it was at that time that I was like, well, mommy, how come she can't stay? Why is she leaving? Because, she and I were like little buddies. We were close in age.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, oh, because she's not adopted. And so I was like, okay. And even again, at that very early age, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm staying because I'm adopted.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you this question. Knowing, and I know we haven't gotten deep down this rabbit hole yet, but at this point, knowing you're adopted and how open your mom was with this information, are you feeling at a place? Are you okay? Like, how were you feeling?
I was totally fine.
Okay.
I never felt me feeling adopted came as an adult, but never in my childhood.
Hmm.
Never in my childhood did I feel adopted. I knew that I was adopted. I knew that there was no resemblance between me and the families, but
Right.
knowing that I was
Right.
adopted, it was okay. But the other thing that made it okay was that people would say, "Oh my God, girl, you look just like your daddy." Okay, and that was
That's all
enough.
you can say to that, right?
Yep.
What do you mean by quote unquote feel adopted?
I never felt out of place.
No,
I
you
never,
said now as an adult
as
you
an adult, I do.
feel adopted. Yeah, what does that like?
So
Can you describe
yeah,
that?
so as an adult, as a child, I always felt like I was a part of the family. As an adult, I do not.
Okay, there's probably a story to that.
Yeah,
We'll get there. There's
yeah,
backstory there. All right, we'll get there.
absolutely,
All right,
absolutely.
we'll get there.
Yeah,
So at what point okay, so you're district differently, so you're not gonna cross paths at school.
yeah.
So at what point do you decide, you know what, I'm going to go, and I might be going too far ahead.
Go
So
ahead.
pull me back if I am.
Mhm.
I'm going to go find these people. And do you tell your parents, I'm getting ready to go find these people?
Yep. So I didn't start my search until I had completed college, and I was like 21,
Okay.
22 at the time.
All right.
And so, but it had been sitting for so long, and I was like, how come I don't know who my folks are? How come I don't know where they are? How come I don't know? How come I don't know?
Hmm.
And that was just a question that I continued to ask myself. And
Can I
so,
ask you a question?
mhm,
Had you started having kids yet?
no,
Okay. All right.
no. So I registered with the New York State Adoption Registry
Mm-hmm.
and, requested information, but because it was a closed adoption, they could only provide non-identifying information.
Mm-hmm.
And that information was your mother was Black and 28 years old. I'm
Now
like,
go find
brother,
her.
right. So that's all they could give me. And I was like, oh my, Black? Why would I not know that? So,
Well, you know.
right. So that's the only information they could provide. Nothing releasing her name, religion, education, nothing. So
Okay.
it was one of those things where I was like, I'm still in the dark. I
Right.
still don't know anything,
Right.
nothing at all. So no matter what I tried to do, I couldn't do anything. I didn't know her first name.
Mm-hmm.
I knew my brother's name, but I didn't know his last name.
Right.
I didn't know my older sister's name. I knew nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
where it started to get good was another adopted relative. One day she just so happened to be looking at Google and Googled her birth mother's name, at which point she found that there was a MySpace page created
Ooh,
with some.
MySpace.
That's how long ago we're talking, right? And
You
actually, it
went
was
back.
2009. So even though Facebook was, going
Yeah, we were still on MySpace in 2009. Yeah, for sure.
exactly.
For sure.
So she was like, "Oh my God!" So she called me and she's like, "I can't believe this," because there was a picture of her and her birth mother when she was a baby on
Okay,
the
so she
as the
knew.
profile picture. So because
Huh.
that was their way of looking for her.
Wow. The social media. Listen,
Yes, yes.
listen.
So my mom was like, she's like, "Cook, you don't have anything," and I'm like, "Mommy, you would have everything. What do I have?" And so I tell the story all the time. My mom used to keep this old brown raggedy suitcase where she kept all of our personal information, social
Mm-hmm.
security cards, birth certificates. So we started digging, 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 digging. And my mom came across like a medical paper that was whited out because, of course, in 1978, 79, you want to keep something private, go ahead and put some white out on it.
Right.
She just scratched it off. When she scratched off, yeah, she just scratched it off. So when she scratched it off, that's when I learned my birth mother's first name.
So you had the paper with her name on it all this time.
All this time. And I'm like, again, this is 2009. I'm 30 years old. And
Right.
so I'm like, oh, shoot. So I go to the internet.
That part.
Right. I'm about to find her. And I did.
Today.
And I did.
She was on MySpace, or you just
She wasn't, no. But
I'm like
she wasn't on MySpace, but her phone number and address was like public information, just like white pages.
Yeah.
You know. So I was like, oh shoot, I got to call her.
You called her and did.
I absolutely called her. Hello. So
but back in the day, according to what you were told, she had a drug problem back in the day, right?
Yep, heavy.
Proceed.
So I called her. You know, I didn't get an answer the first couple of times, and one Friday night, I'm leaving praise team rehearsal at the church. And so I called, and she answered. So my heart is like, boom, 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 boom.
Right.
And I said, hello, may I speak to? And she said, this is she. And I said, hi. I said, this phone call is going to come strange. I said, my name is Jasmine. I was adopted at birth. I am in search of my biological mother. I know that her name is, and I'm wondering if that's you. And she said, I don't think so. So I knew it was her. So I said, okay, are you sure? She said, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I said, okay. I said, I'm sorry to bother. I said, thank you so much for taking my call. But I knew it was her. So when I hung up the phone, I was like, oh my God, I just had a conversation with the woman who carried and birthed me.
That's the weirdest feeling, isn't it?
It's super weird.
Super weird.
So
you know what? I love that you said it like that, because I had a similar thought with the woman that carried me.
Yeah.
I remember thinking something very similar to that.
And
it was weird.
Yeah, it's super weird. I got home to my mom's and I said, Mommy, I spoke to her. She's like, you spoke to who? And I said, I spoke to, Miss So-and-so. And she was like, oh, what did she say? And I was like, she told me that I had the wrong number. And my mom said, well, Cookie, how do you know if it's her? And I said, it was her. She said, you think so? I said, Mommy, it was her. I said, I've never been so sure about anything else, but that was her. My mom said, well, she may not want to be bothered. And I said, that's fine. I said, but I at least know she's still living.
Yeah.
So, I was blown away. So then I moved to Atlanta just a couple of months later. And one of my coworkers openly shared his adoption story.
Okay.
And so, because growing up, I never talked about my adoption. I carried the shame. I carried the guilt that didn't even belong to me. It doesn't belong to us.
It's not your burden to carry.
It's not my burden to carry. My kids downstairs. Okay, I got mine. So,
not at all. It's not your burden.
When he openly shared his adoption story, I told him that, I said, I just called my birth mother a couple of months ago, but she told me that I had the wrong number. So what should I do? He said, write her a letter. He said, the people who were helping me suggested that I write her a letter. And I was like, okay. I'm working in collections, and collections, you can find anybody. So
because the visual I just got, it's you not doing that people's jobs. You at work doing other stuff.
Baby, I went straight to it. Found her. I found 3 addresses. And so I typed up 3 letters. And I sent 2 letters out, and I kept one. Okay. 1 letter came back, and at this time I was pregnant. I'm 30 years old, finally pregnant, my first pregnancy. And I was like, okay, let's just see, what happens. And I got 1 letter returned, but 1 did not. So months went by. I had my daughter by this time. And I came across the 3rd letter that I never mailed. And so I said, well, let me just go ahead and mail this one to the last address. So I mailed it. I didn't think anything of it. I'm sitting on a couch maybe 2-3 days later, and my phone rings. And I'm like, who is this? I'm like, I see a 718 number. I'm like, I don't know who this is. And she leaves me a message. And she said, hi, Jasmine. This is, I received your letter. And I'm letting you know that I'm going to drop a letter in the mail for you tomorrow.
I have a question. Actually, I have several, but I'll just ask one right now. By chance, was it the same number that you had
Yes,
dialed?
yes.
Okay.
And that's the thing that bugged me out because I was like, I know this number.
It was familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I know this. I'm like, who is this? I'm like, this number looks familiar, but I don't know who this is. It's not like I called it on a regular basis,
Right.
And sure enough, it was the same number. Bugged me out. So when I heard her message, I'm like, so, mommy. I called my mother, and my mother was like, you are kidding me. And I'm like, nope. She said she wrote me a letter, So before the letter, this was a Thursday.
Uh-huh.
So before the letter had actually reached my address, I was back on the phone with her the following day.
I know you were, because I would have been too.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for your letter.
Absolutely. Exactly. So, I called her, and I was like, hi. I said, hi, Miss So-and-so. I said, this is Jasmine. You left a message for me last night. She said, it was like she took a deep breath and she was like, yeah, I did. And I was like, so are you my biological mother? She was like, yes, I believe I am. And I was like, is it okay if I get my mother on the phone? Because my mom was like very instrumental in, helping me pursue. She was like, you need to know, you don't know your medical history. You don't know this. You need to know your family. You need to know your family.
Right.
So when I had her on the phone, she was like, she said, yeah. And I know it was probably, in hindsight, I'm like, okay, I put a lot on her.
Girl, you took that right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
And, when she said, okay, I called my mom and I was like, mommy, yeah, babe. And I was like, I have Miss So-and-so on the phone. She was like, you kidding? I'm like, no. And I'm like, Miss So-and-so. She was like, hello. And my mom was like, hi, and so they exchanged, pleasantries and all of this. And, she was thankful to my mom that, she cared for me. She and my dad cared for me. And, she was like, thank you so much. And very apologetic to me. Thankful to my mom, very apologetic to me. And I'd explained it to her. I was like, you don't have to feel any type of way. I didn't have a rough life. I had a good life. I was like, but one thing my mom just always told me was that I should know. So that's the reason why I'm looking for you, and I'm glad that I found you. I'm not resentful. I'm not angry or anything, but I'm thankful that I can now talk to you. So yeah. And when the letter finally got to me, she stated she did not feel like she had any place in my life. So I was like, I guess I can understand that, after 30 years, 31 years,
So where is your dad in all of this?
So you mean my
adopted dad? Well, I'm gonna get there, but your adopted dad, right?
My father passed away in 2003.
Okay.
So he was, out of the picture at this point because he would have never approved. He would have never.
It's so funny that you say that because in my recent experience at reconnecting, and a lot of people were gone. And as I began to learn some things, I'm like, sometimes people got to be gone before you can come back.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah. My father was down for me, put it like that. And I was like his baby. So I think if my father was living, the thought of him having to share me with another family who had given me up, he was a straight shooter. He would have been like, nah. He would, yeah. Really, if I know my father, he would have been like, no.
Yeah.
He would not have gone for it. So by this time, he had passed away.
And then things started to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you get any information about your birth father? Okay, we need to take a. Okay, let me sip your tea.
So I asked.
That was a hard eye roll.
When I met my birth mother, I was like, who was I conceived with? What's the backstory of my paternal side?
Right.
And she was like, oh, his name is so-and-so. he was married with children. You know, I was in a bad place at this time, and da 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 da. So I start digging for the name she given me.
Why are we like that?
What girl?
We,
Because we should know.
every adoptee that I talk, we are so inquisitive, and we are
Yep.
going to find out.
Yep.
I
And
don't care
so-
what you tell me.
Seriously.
I'm going to figure it out by myself.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it bugs me out though to think that as an adoptee, we have to go through life with so many missing pieces and no one wants to give us what is rightfully ours.
Oof.
It is rightfully ours to know who and what we come from. It doesn't matter that drugs are involved. It doesn't matter that abuse was involved. It doesn't matter. I have the right to know.
Right.
But
Because now your story is my story too.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but now we got to go digging. So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I went digging. And then in 2018, I was like, well, let me just do ancestry DNA.
I was, get out of my head, because I was literally about to say, you took a DNA test, didn't you?
Baby.
I was literally about to just say that. And because as I have coined her, Dana DNA, yeah, Dana out here telling on everybody.
Girl.
Mm-hmm.
So what she told me was that there ain't a man with that name in sight that's anywhere remotely related. So everybody on my paternal side comes up as a Franklin or Holland.
But not the name that you were given.
But not the name I was given. So the funny thing about that is that when she had given me that name, I thought to myself, that's not true. Even when she had given me the name, I thought to myself, either she's lying or she doesn't know. Those were always my feelings. So when I came across the name, all these names, because they're either, like I said, whomever they are, there's no name even remotely related to the name she gave me.
Not even.
Baby. So I'm like, okay. So I find some second cousins on Ancestry, and I'm like, hey, it looks like we're second cousins. You know.
Do they respond?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Some even tried to help. And so they're trying to, you know, put the pieces together with me and so forth. And I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere. So I guess was it last year? I think it was last year that I had someone pop up as a first cousin.
That's close.
So close, and she's older in age. So I'm thinking to myself, well, if she's older in age, there's the possibility that she could be an aunt. Because you know how, like, even with my brother, when I found him, that I did Ancestry, he did my heritage, but you could upload your ancestry results to my heritage. And when I did that, I got a hit. Of course, I went to social media and I was like, hey, so-and-so, I'm Jasmine. I believe we're siblings. That's the message I sent her.
We're gonna shut down your account.
I'll just create a new one. So really. And so when I sent him a message, I was like, hey, so-and-so, I'm Jasmine. I believe we're siblings. And he's like, wait, what? Yeah.
Hold on, wait. Because I understand the energy. I have the same energy. But hearing this energy from somebody else, I'm like, oh, I'm probably a lot.
And it's okay. It's okay.
I have the same energy, so I get it.
These are the cards dealt to us. This is what we have.
This is what we have the same energy, so I'm right there with you. I get it.
So, you know, as I talk about it and as I reach out, I don't care how anybody feels. I honestly don't care.
I don't either.
When I say I don't care,
I understand.
People who know me know I don't care. I couldn't care less because I didn't ask for this.
Say it again.
You know, I didn't ask for it. And so
I'm a product of whatever you decided to do with whomever you decided to do it with. What you didn't know way back then is we was going to be out here taking random DNA tests. That's what you didn't know.
And feel no way about it. So
no way.
If you don't like it, tough.
Sorry. Not sorry.
Right.
I'm really not
And so
sorry.
the funny thing about that is that I feel like, when this close relative came up, she's an older lady, and those are the ones who don't want to get involved, because for them it's like, I don't want to get
Don't dig it
involved in
up.
this.
Don't dig it up.
Right. I just
Don't
did
dig
this
it
for
up.
my family tree. I'm in your family tree. You better get the green leaf and put my name on it, because I'm a part of that tree.
You almost made me spit all my tea out.
I want my green
She
leaf.
said,
I want my green leaf.
I want my green leaf. Put me on your tree.
Put me on the tree. Put me on the tree.
And that's so funny because I am the ancestry queen. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. I like puzzles. So for me, that's a jigsaw puzzle. And so if you're familiar with ancestry, you know exactly what she's talking about.
Absolutely. And so, for me, I was just like, and I know one lady, she said, okay, I think we stumbled across something very sensitive. I realized that. But I want to know, who the pappy? Who is out there? Who done laid with a woman back in 1970s, late 1977, early 1978, and conceived a child, and then was able to go on with their married life? Like,
Right.
they don't have a child out here. And I mean, I don't even know if they know about me.
Right. Right.
She could have very well gotten pregnant, delivered that baby, went on about her business, and was like, get somebody else to do it.
Very much. Yeah.
So he may not even know, but he should. I know.
Honey,
I
get
know
back
that
to this relative.
Right.
Get back to this relative that's like, girl.
So, the relative, the first cousin, older woman, and you know how like the variations of ancestry or DNA period, it can vary.
Right.
So, like for instance, my brother came up as my nephew, but he's my half brother. So this woman,
it's that percentage of DNA that they're
right. So she comes up as my first or second cousin, but there's a possibility that she's my aunt. So my thought was, I wonder if she has a brother she doesn't know about. Because baby, hunching been around for a long time, okay? They've been hunching. Hunching been around for a long time. Baby, they've been hunching for a long time.
They have been. I'm not disagreeing with you.
This ain't nothing new. Okay?
Oh, God. I wasn't ready.
So, they act like having kids outside of your marriage is something new. Baby.
Listen, they've been doing it for years, and then everybody show up at the funeral, and everybody's shocked.
Right.
Because that's usually how it comes out.
That is absolutely how it comes out. I know somebody who lost their grandfather, was it 10 years ago? 10, maybe 10, I don't know, some years ago. But then it was, oh, who's that? Oh, you didn't know he had a child?
That's exactly what happens.
So, baby, they've been hunching for centuries.
Happens all the time.
They've been hunching for centuries.
Okay, let's get back to your family tree.
Right. So I realized at some point that this first cousin didn't want to be too helpful. She did tell me, she said, Jasmine, I believe your father may be my uncle so-and-so. But then that would have meant that my father and her were like first cousins. And I think it was closer than that. So I wasn't sure. And then when I realized, I was like, so when I realized she started to take a back seat, I just followed her lead, and I sort of took a back seat and started to, continue searching on my own.
Right.
And so I'm still stuck there.
Okay.
But I saw your podcast with the birth parent finder.
Yes.
So I plan to hit him up.
Hit him up.
Yeah. I plan to hit him up. So, I'm just trying to get myself emotionally prepared, because I want him to help me find a brother from my maternal side. That's the last of the siblings, and all of my paternal side.
All your paternal side.
Yeah, because who the pappy?
My God, today.
Right. So, and like all of this, again, growing up, never felt adopted. That happened in my later years as an adult. That's when it really started to hit me. And it was just kind of like, okay, I'm adopted.
Right.
I can accept it.
Right.
I can talk about it. And I'm okay with talking about it now because it's my story.
I'm so
And
glad you came to that realization.
yes, and it took a long time
Cause
to,
see, what I can't personally relate to is the shame and the embarrassment because I never experienced that. I'm on the
mhm,
total opposite end of the spectrum. I was around like, hello, my name is Tarcia and I'm adopted.
yeah.
And my mom was like, girl, you don't have to tell everybody. You don't have to do
I
that.
I could never articulate those words. Even
I
even if
did.
you had asked, I would have said no. I have friends who had asked, "Are you adopted?" Because they knew that my parents were foster parents. They saw kids
Mm-hmm.
coming and going.
Right.
You know, they saw that there was no resemblance. Are you adopted? No. It was too difficult
That's
because
so
me saying
interesting.
that I was adopted was me saying my mother didn't want me. And nobody wants that feeling.
Huh.
Nobody wants that
Never,
feeling. And
I
so
never,
for me, it was too difficult to articulate. And then of course I always recalled my father's reaction. What you telling for? So I'm like, okay.
yeah.
So pairing that with the embarrassment and the shame and the shame of, knowing that you were given up by the very person who is typically responsible for you.
And see, I never articulated it like that. It was, I was given up and my parents had me since I was 5 weeks old.
Yeah.
And I think because they told me so young
Hmm.
and because anytime I asked a question, they answered it.
Yeah.
Now, and it did make me begin to wonder.
Hmm.
And as we as adoptees sometimes do, we create these magical worlds in our heads
Yep.
of what those people might have been like and where
Yep.
they are. And in my case, only to be disappointed because it was none of that.
Hmm. Right.
Um, but I never felt ashamed. I never felt
I did.
how you articulated it, like, oh,
Hmm.
somebody gave me up. I I think I knew that, but
Hmm. Hmm. And so, and that's the thing. I think for me, especially now being a mom, carrying my daughters and feeling all of their kicks and their, all their
mm-hmm,
movements, the flutters and everything that
mm-hmm.
comes, I naturally had the excitement like, oh my God, somebody's going to call me mom. Like I could not imagine not wanting to be their mom.
Now I
But
did experience that. I do
yeah,
recall after I had my kids, and like as I got older, and then in hindsight, like, ooh, that was hard.
yeah,
Because, like you said, you carry, you feel, and da, da, da.
yes,
And then you go through the labor, and it's
yep,
like, and to have to.
yep,
So I began to empathize with that, but that didn't come till much later. Like, I had to experience that myself
right,
to be able to go, oh,
yeah,
okay. But it still didn't make me ashamed. It still didn't make me feel like, oh, she gave me up. Like,
hmm.
I don't know. That's just not my testimony about
Have you
that.
ever seen the video? It was floating around social media, I guess a couple of years ago. It's a little girl standing in a circle and her friends are circling around her. And it's like, your mama smoked crack pipe, whatever it is.
Your
I
mama's
can't
on
remember.
crack rock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes.
I imagine being a little girl in a circle, you know? So,
Mm.
so for that reason, I could never be upset with her because at the end of the day, had she not made the decision that she made,
Who
I could have been
knows?
the little girl in the circle being raised by a drug addicted woman in Bedford Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, New York. You know what I'm saying?
That part.
So, and I'm glad that I can't relate to that. You
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
can't relate to that because she made the decision to give me up.
And when I did meet my maternal side and I did understand what it was and what it could have been for me,
Hmm.
thank you.
Right. Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
So,
for
and when
making
I
that
met,
decision.
Absolutely. And even when I met my biological mother, she is now deceased. She passed away 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I had physically met her for the first time in 2011.
Okay.
And it was just kind of like, for me, I'm like, oh, okay, I see the resemblance, you know. Um, but it wasn't that mother daughter connection. We would
Mm-hmm.
talk often and everything, but it wasn't like that. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
No,
It was none of
I didn't
that.
have that experience.
Right. It was not. It was none of that. And
It I
so,
I did it's weird, and it's one thing to talk to them on the phone, but then to lay eyes on that person, it's like, ooh. But I experienced that too. I
mhm,
didn't feel like like I could see. To me, I looked more like my brother
mhm. Oh
than I
yeah,
did her.
just like him. That's for that.
You
Just
saw
like him.
that?
He just has facial hair, and he's built like a man because he is a man. Just like him. Yeah.
And so, but that was outside of my kids. He's the first person outside of that I laid eyes on. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yeah. And it's just so crazy because I met her when she was clean. And I'm
Okay.
talking about a woman who's sharp, very articulate, very intelligent,
Mm,
but she has succumbed to the demons of society and was left in a place where she was unable to care for her children. But meeting her in her clean years, I was like, oh my God. I mean, this woman is sharp. She was sharp,
yeah.
and street savvy, very articulate, very smart. But again, she succumbed to the demons of society.
Society. Yeah.
And, I wasn't angry with her. I could never be angry
Yeah.
with
I
her.
wasn't angry about it either.
Yeah, I wasn't angry at all, but it was just wanting to know because here I am, I'm in a family that I'm not really a part of.
Mm,
And so, and like I said earlier, now that, that feeling of adoption that you didn't have as a child, now that it's present as an adult, it's kind of like, hold up. Now it makes me want to know everything.
yeah.
Now I really need to know who I come from, where I come from, who these people, who the
Yeah.
pappy,
Yeah.
because, I realize this isn't, look at that. I realize this isn't my birth family. And
Yeah.
so when you get to the point where you really start to feel adopted, it's kind of like, all right, I need to know the truth.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
So
So I have one final question for you, or it might be a statement for you.
mhm.
If you had to tell the adoptee community one thing about telling their story, what would you say to them?
Own it.
Mm.
I heard someone say before, our stories are not for us. We live it, we experience it, but our stories are not for us. They are to be shared because you're helping other people as you use your voice to share your story. So, whatever guilt, shame, embarrassment that you carry, let it go. Our stories are not for us. And in an attempt to help out someone else who has a very similar story, talk about it. Talk about it.
Fro-
But I
okay,
know,
there you go. There you go.
okay. But yeah, just talk
Okay.
about it. The guilt, shame, embarrassment that we carry is not for us. Our stories are not for us. We are helping other people build the courage that they need. So talk about it.
I love that. Talk
Yeah.
about it. And I love that you said lose the guilt, shame.
Yeah.
Stop
It doesn't
carrying around
belong
those
to us.
burdens. It doesn't belong to you. Not at all.
Yeah. It doesn't
Not
belong
at
to us.
all.
Yeah.
Yes, I am adopted.
Yeah. I'm adopted. I didn't sign any adoption papers.
I
I
didn't
didn't
sign
say,
any.
come pick me up.
I didn't until nobody come pick me up. But oh my
Right. I ain't
God,
told nobody to come pick me up.
I'm so
You
glad
know,
that they did though.
right.
I will. That part,
That is a fact.
that is an absolute fact.
That is a
And I
fact.
know that's not everybody's testimony, but it's my
Yep.
testimony
Yep. For a fact.
for a fact.
Yep. Yep.
Jasmine, think my cup is empty.
I know. Look, I got one sip left, but it's not even hot no more.
It's definitely not even hot because it's empty.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I thank you so much for coming and telling your story
Thank
and
you.
being brave enough to tell your story, because once upon a time you weren't telling your story
At all.
and I want the family to know that she is free and light.
And I am. And it's okay.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And you're
Yep.
okay. Absolutely.
Yep.
So thank you for coming
Thank you.
on. You're
Of course.
welcome. And until next week, bye,
Yeah.
family.
Bye.
Journey on. You need a pie with the good? Oh yeah, what's the one?